After the pretty decent success of Sonic Mania back in 2017, a lot of fans speculated that a follow-up to the game would be the most obvious thing for Sega to capitalize on, and they'd be right because a sequel for the game was worked on pretty immediately, but it wouldn't pan out the way most fans probably hoped it would. Initially, Takashi Iizuka did recruit the Mania team again, consisting of Christian Whitehead and company, to make a brand new classic Sonic game. According to Whitehead, Iizuka didn't necessarily want this to be a full-on sequel to Mania, since he actually desired for the team to approach the game with a more unique and fresh concept. He wanted to ditch the pixel art style and not reuse any content from previous games like Mania did, which I actually respect a lot. Don't get me wrong, the art direction for Mania was incredible stuff, but I probably would not have been as hyped about this game if it just looked like another Mania. Whitehead would say that they actually tried two different art styles. One of them was using traditional animation, which I think just about everyone would have loved, especially if it was something similar to what Rayman Origins or Legends did, but the team would ultimately land on a 2.5D approach for the game, which wasn't bad at all. A prototype for the game would be made using the Star engine, which is the current version of the retro engine that was used in Whitehead's previous projects. Though pretty early on in development, Christian Whitehead and his team Evening Star decided to not move past the prototype and ultimately parted ways with the project. It's a little devastating that the Mania team ended up leaving, but as Whitehead has tried to clarify, this was not because of creative differences between them or Sonic Team. Despite not working on the rest of the game, Evening Star would go on to get a special thanks credit in Superstars, which is really sweet. However, I would be lying if I said Whitehead and the rest of the team were kind of the best case scenario when it came to fans working on a classic Sonic game. So if they were all gone, who else could Sonic Team go to? Dimps? Nah, I don't think the world is ready for Sonic 4 Episode 3 anytime soon. Foreshadowing? Well, not too long after the Mania team left, a miracle would end up happening during a pretty horrible state of the world at the time. This was when in 2020, Iizuka would end up getting into a drinking party that was held in a Zoom call, where he was accompanied by none other than one of Sonic's co-creators. In fact, Sonic's very own original character designer, Naoto Oshima. You see, Oshima actually left Sonic Team in 1998, shortly after the development of Sonic Adventure wrapped, and he would go on to form his own company, Artoon, in 1999. Here he would create games like the two Blinks games, and even Yoshi's Island DS, before the company sadly closed down in 2010. Though key people from Artoon, including Oshima, would go on to form another company, Arzest. Arzest would end up developing Yoshi's New Island, Hey Pikmin, the 3DS port of Mario and Sonic at the Rio 2016 Olympic Games. They would also be involved with the 3DS remake of Mario and Luigi Bowser's Inside Story, and not to mention co-developing with Square Enix on Balan Wonderworld. Yeah, you remember Balan, right? Clearly Yuji Naka's best creation since Sonic. At least Oshima's designs were cute. So, getting back to Sonic's other creator, during their Zoom call, Naoto Oshima and Takashi Iizuka would get to discussing the Sonic franchise, and eventually it led to them discussing the possibility of Oshima working on the next classic Sonic game, which, well, ended up happening, with Oshima's company Arzest coming on board to make a brand new classic Sonic game. Wow, Takashi Iizuka and Naoto Oshima working on a new Sonic game together for the first time in over 2 decades? Man, where's Yuji Naka when you need— oh yeah. Arzest's new classic Sonic game would mostly be made from scratch, not rehashing any elements from previous games. It was also apparently developed on the Unity engine. I mean, if it worked for Monkey Ball, then I guess it could work for Sonic. Plus, even though the retro/Star engine from Mania wasn't really used entirely, the physics code for it would be translated into a new game, as confirmed by Christian Whitehead. And, you know, regardless of what many people may think of this game, that's pretty fucking great. Development officially began in 2021, and to my knowledge, I don't think there was a huge leak for Superstars. Okay, maybe some random person in the community somewhere predicted its existence, but I still remember being pleasantly surprised when the game was revealed in June 2023. Okay, not entirely. I have a close friend who does stuff with Sega. They got to play it early, they told me all about it, they told me about Naoto Oshima, this was over a year ago, but they didn't tell me when the game was gonna get revealed, so I was still pretty caught off guard when the reveal trailer was posted. posted. Oh yeah, I guess there was the one leak for the game's original title, Sonic Orion, which was a pretty whack title and was clearly modeled after the Origins logo. Glad they changed it. The Superstars title's pretty good, and it's very fitting. As the trailer showed off, it was pretty promising. 4 playable characters including Sonic, Tails, and Amy. New 4-player co-op in a Sonic game for the first time. No online for it though. New Chaos Emerald powers. More animated cutscenes by Tyson Hess. And the return of Fang the Sniper as the main villain. Though Fang would be officially renamed as Fang the Hunter, which I'm not sure how to feel about. And yes, this is the actual Fang, not an illusion like in Sonic Mania. So that's pretty neat. The game would also feature a new character designed by Naoto Oshima himself, who was Trip the Sun Gazer, a female character who's seen wearing armor throughout the main game. All in all, I thought the game looked promising and I was very much looking forward to it. Then a few cracks started rearing their ugly heads. Jun Sonoe was the sound director, which would be pretty exciting if this wasn't for a classic Sonic game. But then it was revealed that T-Whoops was also going to be part of the project, which gave me some relief. For a short while. Then the price tag was dropped. It was a full $60. And to make it worse, there was yet another digital deluxe edition that cranked up the price to $70, just like what happened with the last few games. Everyone's like that so far, right? And don't even get me started on how fucking mismanaged the DLC was. Making DLC exclusive to other countries outside of America is unbelievably stupid. Not to mention another newsletter exclusive DLC. Why? Why was this happening again? And what do you mean I can only get the best DLC skins at fucking Kroger's? What the hell are they doing? Wait, is that the rabbit concept design for Sonic as a skin? Oh, that's really cute. Okay, so these awful aspects that plagued the previous games, and even Origins, were present, but I just waited patiently for the game to release to see what it was gonna be like. And you know what? I kind of really liked it. In fact, I'll even go on record to say that I loved Sonic Superstars. For the most part. Screw the introductions, let's get to the actual game. Just like with Mania and Origins, Superstars has an animated opening cutscene at the title screen. While Tyson Hess did come back to direct the animated cutscenes, this opening cutscene was actually handled by someone else, Toshihiko Matsuda, who actually worked on Sonic X in the past. I saw some fans complaining about the jittery frame rate in this opening cutscene, but I honestly didn't mind it. It's a really cool opening and I don't have much else to say. Starting the game up, there are 5 save slots you can choose from, and in a pretty great upgrade to them, save data no longer has to be locked to a specific character like in Sonic 3 or Mania, so you can choose any character on any save slot, which is great. And why the hell did it take so long for a classic Sonic game to do this right? Well, the story for the game involves Eggman teaming up with Fang the Sniper, the Hunter, where both of them come across a new location, the North Star Islands. The islands are home to much bigger animals, so Eggman decides he's going to use them to make larger batniks to take over the world. Upon visiting the island, they come across the new character, Trip. And kinda like with Knuckles in Sonic 3, they recruit Trip to help assist them with their efforts on the island. So it's up to Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, and even Amy to head out to the island to stop Eggman and Fang, befriend Trip, and save the world again. The game tells its story through animated cutscenes at the start and end of the game, along with doing the Sonic 3 and Mania method of having silent cutscenes playing in between zones. I don't want to reveal too much, at least not until a little later when I look at the levels, but I really like the cutscenes, they're super cute. The story was apparently written by Iizuka himself, which caught me off guard because I just kind of assumed Ian Flynn was going to be the one handling the story scenario segments for now. But I guess he couldn't work on this game because he was a little busy with the Frontiers DLC. Jumping right into the gameplay, Sonic Superstars may not be the first 2.5D Sonic game, but it is the first time a 2.5D Sonic game got the gameplay just right. As I said earlier, the Mania team were not directly involved in Superstars, but the code for Mania's physics were carried over from the Retro engine and flawlessly converted into Sonic Superstars. As a result, this game plays perfectly like Mania and Origins, which were 2 games that also played pretty spot on with the original Genesis games too. So yeah, I have literally no complaints about the gameplay or controls. They're perfect and rock solid like before. It took some time for 2.5D Sonic games to finally get this right, but we've come a long way from Sonic Generations. Or more accurately, we've come a long way since Sonic 4, or more honestly, we've come a long way since than Sonic Forces. Seriously, the difference in quality here is astounding. They really did a fantastic job. When it comes to the characters, we start out with the main four. Sonic is the standard one to choose, playing exactly like he does in Mania, drop dash and all. I do kinda miss the insta-shield from Sonic 3, and I wish it was in this game as an option, but it's not a huge deal. When it comes to Tails and Knuckles, Tails can fly, and Knuckles can glide and climb walls. Not to mention every character can spin dash. Then there's Amy Rose, whose gameplay we already sort of got a preview of in Sonic Origins Plus back in June. So Amy has her hammer attack that can be activated pretty similar to Sonic's drop dash, and she now has a double jump. I think the double jump actually makes her slightly better than she was in Origins Plus. I do kinda wish they just mapped her hammer attack to another button. I don't really understand why they keep doing the limited control scheme like they were on the Genesis still. I guess it's to make it feel a little more authentic, but I don't know, I think utilizing all the buttons wouldn't have been that huge a deal. Usually, I'd look at all the main single player content first, then I'd bring up the Chaos Emeralds, but I'm not gonna do that this time since this is like the 5th or 6th main classic Sonic game I've looked at so far. At least on Coop's reviews. We all should know what the Chaos Emeralds are at this point, and also that you need to look for them. Just like the other classic Sonic games, you earn Chaos Emeralds from special stages. And just like in Sonic 3 and Sonic Mania, you gotta find giant rings in the levels to access the special stages. The special stages themselves are kinda piss easy. It has you traveling in a 3D space where you're swinging on floating spears in the air. And later on, the stages throw in little spike bombs for you to look out for. So while stages 6 and 7 kinda gave me a hard time, for the most part, for me, they weren't really that bad. Like, the stages themselves aren't terrible, and I actually like that they tried to make something original again, but I do think they pale in comparison with Mania's special stages, which are still my favorite. So while the special stages themselves are mostly easy to deal with, the way the game handles the giant special rings is, interesting. Basically, you're limited to get 1 emerald per zone, which is exactly like how Sonic 3D Blast on Sega Saturn and PC handled that. I know, out there comparison, but stick with me. I feel like a lot of fans are gonna hate this decision, but I actually kinda welcome it. Don't get me wrong, I love collecting all the emeralds as fast as possible in the previous games, then getting to use Super Sonic to plow through the rest of the levels. Lots of fun, can't get enough of it. But I kind of admire that this game limited this to sort of justify making people actually play the game without just breaking everything as Super Sonic like in the past, and early on in the game if you're a veteran player like me. But yes, collecting all 7 Chaos Emeralds will let each character become super, and it's just as good as it was before. However, the main reason why I decided to bring up the Chaos Emeralds so early on is because of their new gimmick. Each Chaos Emerald can now grant the characters new abilities, and every time you get an emerald, the game has you do a tutorial on how you use a new power. Looking at the new abilities, the blue emerald can let you use the avatar power, which will cause clones of your character to appear on screen and attack enemies. The red emerald gives you the ability to shoot the character in the air, letting you aim in whichever direction you want to go. The cyan emerald gives you the ability to turn into a little water creature, which lets you travel through water faster, and even travel up waterfalls to find different sections of levels. The green emerald lets you be able to grow an ivy plant out the ground to travel upwards. The purple emerald lets you use a vision ability to view hidden platforms or even rings that are invisible. The yellow emerald lets you slow down everything in the level to get past certain obstacles that are traveling way too fast, or if you want to just cheese through a section. It's a decent ability, though I do think it's kind of a missed opportunity to not have the slow power also slow down the timer. I think that would have been pretty fun for time trials and other speedrun methods. It's kind of weird that they just didn't have it do that. And the last emerald, being the white one, can temporarily give your character an extra ability. Sonic can get the homing attack, Tails can create little tornadoes using his tails, Knuckles can punch, first time in a 2D game since the advanced games probably, and Amy can throw hammers? Hyper Amy, is that you? So, counting the super forms, that is 8 extra abilities you can use after collecting all the Chaos Emeralds. This was a genuinely cool concept to do with the Chaos Emeralds, and I think they really help add to the replay value. And before the more obnoxious side of the Sonic fanbase speaks up, yes, the Chaos Emerald powers were very clearly inspired by the Wisp from Sonic Colors. Oshima even stated that during the time he wasn't working on the games anymore, he was still checking out some of the newer titles like Colors and really enjoyed it. So it makes makes sense that he would want to do his own version of the Wisp powers but with the Chaos Emeralds. Plus, lore-wise, it would have been really fucking stupid if he just put the actual Wisp in the game. Like, holy shit, that would have pissed everyone off. I'd even go as far to say that I think the Emerald powers are much better versions of the Wisps, especially since they don't really interrupt the game flow while you're playing, and they're very optional too. Now, before you Sonic fans type, Cooper, the Wisps were also optional in Colors too, you fucking idiot. Yes, they were! I'm well aware. My takeaway is that while they were optional, the level design in Colors was worse. Like, way worse. So not using the Wisps actually made the game less entertaining to play. So yeah, I love the new Chaos Emerald powers, and I think they were an awesome inclusion. But one kind of annoying thing is that the game sort of pulls a Sonic Heroes where when you reach a certain part of the level, it'll usually prompt you to use a specific power to get past a certain segment, which can be a little obnoxious to come across over and over again. I kinda wish there was an option to turn that off. You're also only allowed to use a power one time, at least until you run past a checkpoint again, which can replenish your emerald powers. Regardless, you can still choose which emerald power you want to use by rotating the right analog stick, which kind of reminds me of GTA 5 weirdly enough. That game really revolutionized choosing items. But you can also cycle through the powers by using the shoulder buttons, which is what I mostly used. And there's also one really cool thing I discovered about the super forms. Describing how it works on Xbox, I found out that if you press the X button while you're super, it'll shut off your super form. Yes, this is the first classic Sonic game where you can shut off a super form while you're playing. So you don't have to wait for your rings to run out or use a bonus stage, which I'll get to in a bit. Not only that, but this is like the first main Sonic game to let you do that with a super form since, Christ, Sonic Lost World from 10 fucking years ago? I am a little confused if this was even an intentional design choice or maybe it was just done by complete accident, but who cares? It's convenient! Apart from the Chaos Emeralds, what else is there to look for in these levels? Well, just like the last few games, we don't have a life function, which I preferred, but I will admit I do kind of wish that at least gave fans the option to use lives or not. So whenever you collect 100 rings, instead of a life, you'll get a medal. You can also find medals in hidden parts of the levels. And if you already got a Chaos Emerald in a zone, all the special rings are going to turn blue. And jumping into them lets you replay the stage, but now with a medal taking the place of the Chaos Emerald. What are the medals for? Well, they're mainly used for this game's shop where you buy robot parts for the battle mode, which I'll delve more into later. You can also earn medals in this game's bonus stages, which you can access by causing blue portals to appear after you pass a checkpoint. The bonus stages are very adorably modeled after the Sonic 1 special stages, which I love so goddamn much. Sure, Sonic 4 and even Sonic 3 brought these back. Hell, even Sonic CD was gonna have something like them, but they were scrapped. Still, as a Sonic 1 purist, there's not very many of us in the wild, I just love the inclusion of these, it just makes me so happy. There's also yellow portals that can appear from time to time, which will take you to these different but shorter bonus areas to collect a bunch of rings. They're neat. I just prefer the blue portal bonus stages for very obvious reasons. While you won't be able to find extra lives anymore, you can still come across the standard blue shield, ring boxes, and even the speed shoes. I gotta say, these might just be my favorite 3D models ever made for the TV monitors. They really help the 2.5D graphics pop out more. Sadly, none of the elemental shields from Sonic 3 or Mania make a return. Instead, we get this magnet ability which can draw in rings. It's fine, but I wouldn't really consider it a shield because if you get hit, you'll still lose all your rings, which is really annoying and it just makes me wish the electric shield was brought back instead. Graphically, I really like the way this game looks. It's not entirely my ideal look for a classic Sonic game, but I still really love how cartoony and colorful every level in the game can appear. I think it's got to that point where I'm just gonna look at all the zones in the game now. There's 11 zones to play through and they can all vary in acts, with some acts being tied to specific characters even. While I'm at it, I'm also gonna look at the bosses. First up is Bridge Island Zone, which is 2 acts in a pretty great starting zone. I love the blue checkerboard designs. It reminded me a lot of Hilltop Zone from Sonic 2. I especially love the pretty sunset you see later, along with those sick rainbows. Just overall a good zone. The mini boss in Act 1 is, well, it's definitely mini since you can just outright ignore it and keep running. Meanwhile, the Act 2 boss is a pretty decent Eggman fight. While there's the two main acts in Bridge Island Zone, the zone is also the first to include these Act Fruit bonus acts. They're mainly used for collecting a bunch of rings, leading to earning more medals too, but you're only able to access them by collecting enough fruits in the levels, so you can't just spam the fruit acts over and over again to rack up on medals. The next zone is Speed Jungle, which has two main acts and an extra act exclusive for Sonic. This level has you running through a forest where there's a bunch of ruins of Eggman's old factories and inventions in the background. There's also these fun vines you can jump on to shoot you straight up in the air. There's even branches that you can grind on, which mechanically are pretty cool. They're both momentum based and also don't make you automatically start grinding once you hop on them. I'm not sure how many people are going to care about that technical difference, but I really like it. Sonic's exclusive act is where you're going to encounter Fang the Hunter for the first time, who's chasing Sonic throughout the act, with Fang driving around in his hover bike, canonically known as the Marvelous Queen. Thank you for that factoid, Cybershell. Or should I say, officially sponsored by Sega, Cybershell. I never thought I'd see that day come. Act 2 has portions of the level covered up in fog, and there's a lot of open space here too. So I didn't really do a breakdown of the level design because I didn't really see a reason to. I feel like RZES did a pretty spectacular job with the level layouts, for the most part. I'll get a bit more into it later. But getting back to Speed Jungle, the zone also features the first real official appearance of Splats, a cut enemy from Sonic 1. Though a version of him did appear in Sonic Mania, Superstars is the first time the original Splats actually appears, so it's pretty neat to see him finally appear in an official game. Looking at the Act 1 mini-boss, it's this horned mosquito, which can shoot out its stinger, and you could use it to jump at him. The Act 2 boss is this indestructible egg robot that can only be damaged by its own attacks, being another drill attack and these missiles, where you're only able to knock the blue ones back at him. Remember that for later. It's a decent boss fight, but while playing it, it really reminded me of something.
The only thing hard enough to penetrate it is itself.
Zone 3 is Sky Temple, which is the first zone in the game to have just one act. But is anyone else bothered by how it still says Act 1 on the level name? Like, it's the only act. What's the point of clarifying that it's Act 1? Anyways, this zone is a pretty decent amount of fun, with a great mixture of pretty visuals and fun ideas, along with some other aspects that not everyone's gonna really like. First off, I love these cute little breakout sections. It's so fucking cool. It really made me smile when I first played it. But as my first time playthrough of the level continued, I did notice two big issues that most likely weren't gonna sit well with people. One was that this was the first level where bottomless pits became a huge hazard, which, yeah, not a fun idea. You don't normally come across them until mostly near the end, and they can be avoidable if you're just careful enough. But then I noticed something else about the level that made me do a second take. While playing and having fun, I looked to the top left corner to see how long I was in the level and noticed, oh wow, I've been playing this level for quite a while. Oh no. Yeah, this game seems to take a note from both Sandopolis and Sonic Heroes, since these levels can sometimes last a little too long. Now, I'm a complete lunatic who probably plays these games way more often than a normal person probably should, so I love longer levels, but for the average Joe or basic bitch who plays these games and expects to run through the levels super fast, well, you chose to spend the $60 on this game. As I've made clear, I personally don't like plowing through Sonic levels super fast, unless it's a game like Sonic Rush or maybe Sonic Unleashed where it's really designed to be that way. But for any standard classic Sonic game that doesn't have a boost function, I don't really like approaching the games as if you have to go super fast all the time, cause speed is supposed to be something you're earned, not given to you on a silver platter. That's what I feel like the level design in this game mostly does, and I'm pretty sure that's a big reason why a lot of people probably don't like this game that much. I got a bit sidetracked, but basically I like longer lasting levels, but it most definitely isn't gonna be everyone's cup of tea. But anyways, the boss for Sky Temple has you fighting Eggman while in the air, and you gotta avoid him sending out buzzsaws and also trying to crush Sonic. It's a decent fight, but kinda like the zone itself, it's the first boss that really lasts a bit too long. And while I said I don't really mind longer levels, longer boss fights, even for me, are not fun. Especially if you spent a decent amount of time fighting the boss, only to die and have to redo the entire boss fight all over again. I'd be a little shocked to see anyone defending this, but then again, I've seen Sonic fans defend worse. After that zone is Pinball Carnival, which has two acts, and it's probably the first zone where I feel genuinely mixed about it. Act 1 is great. It's colorful and has some really fun pinball segments. nuts. Graphically, it's probably my favorite looking level. The stripe patterns on the floor also kinda remind me of the ones from Uniracers on Super Nintendo, or Unirally as it's known in some other countries. Did anyone else play that growing up? Also, the trees at the end of Act 1, did anyone else think they kinda look like the trees from Mario 64? But yeah, overall, Act 1 is solid, goofy fun. Act 2 is where it kinda falls apart, starting with these roller coaster segments that wouldn't necessarily be so bad if it weren't for the fact that it was placed over a huge bottomless pit. There's no way to avoid these sections either, so you could easily jump off the roller coaster and just fall straight to your death. While I'm thankful we don't have a lives function anymore, I do wonder if maybe this design philosophy of not having lives may have got to the developers' heads, which led to them just leaving in this huge ass bottomless pit because there's no real penalty since you don't have any game overs. I guess, but that doesn't really mean the section's fun. Why not just put a platform down there for us to run on? Why is it just a huge bottomless pit? How would that not look weird as hell on the level map? Playing as Tails and using his flying, along with using Knuckles gliding and wall crawling, can make skipping these sections a little easier, but god. I still think Pinball Carnival is a solid zone, but Act 2 really could have been executed better. Even though Act 2 isn't that great, I do kinda like how this one's a bit more Halloween themed. And to add a bit more to that, if you look hard enough, you're gonna find a Tailstall cameo, and touching him will give you medals. I really wasn't expecting Tailstall to make an appearance in this game, so it's pretty cool. The Act 1 mini-boss is this piss-easy clown that doesn't really deserve that much attention, while Act 2 involves using these spinning wheels to jump at Eggman, which is pretty fun, and it's a little better than the Sky Temple boss, mainly because it's way shorter. Next is Lagoon City Zone, and unlike Pinball Carnival, I don't have any major issues with this level. It has 2 acts, along with an exclusive act for Amy, and it's one of the most gorgeous looking levels in the game. The water looks really nice, and it's actually not that bad in comparison to the other water levels in the franchise, especially since it seems like they made the air bubbles spawn in a lot faster. I also love the water slides. They're pretty fun. Amy's act involves her running around knocking a bunch of fruit out the way, but it's mainly for showing how she met Trip for the first time, which is one of the more cuter cutscenes. It's a relatively short but decent act. The Act 1 mini-boss has you fighting this squid-looking Batnik, who has one of the coolest designs in the game, and it's not a bad fight. But Act 2's Eggman boss fight sadly falls under the same issues as the Sky Temple boss fight, where it goes on for way too long. It also takes place entirely underwater, where you're first traveling upwards to smack Eggman. If this was all the boss fight was, then it wouldn't be too bad, but then Eggman drives off and there's another phase where you gotta keep chasing after him, while also avoiding drowning and his different attacks. It's not that the boss fight is necessarily difficult, it's just that it lasts for way too long. And again, if you die, there's no checkpoints, so you gotta replay the entire boss fight. Needless to say, if you ever replay Act 2 for whatever reason, but you manage to get all the Chaos Emeralds, use the super form for this boss fight. It'll make it a hell of a lot quicker. After that is Sand Sanctuary Zone, and it's okay. Obviously, it's the desert level, and it only lasts a single act. It does go on for a bit too long, but it's thankfully not a horrible level either, though it does kinda pale in comparison to Mirage Saloon, mainly Act 2. I do love the little spider Batniks. They're pretty cute. There's also a funny wavy snake you can come across and use as a platform. You see his face at the end of the zone and also on the overworld. Oh yeah, the game has an overworld, which is neat. Not too much else to really say about it. It gets the job done about as well as the ones in Advance 3 and Generations. I also love that unlike Sonic Mania and the other classic games, you can choose between different acts separately. It's a really basic feature, and I don't really understand why only the Advance games and Superstars appear to have done this. Getting back to the level, the Eggman boss fight is fine and can be pretty short. Eggman is mostly in the background, and you can either knock a Batnik back at him, or just jump into him when he appears in the foreground. Not a bad fight, not too much else to say. Zone 7 is Press Factory, and I don't like this level too much. While I've had some gripes and issues with a few other levels, Press Factory is the first zone where I just actively don't want to play it again. It's not very fun, and it's mainly because both acts have some pretty annoying gimmicks. Act 1 has this background element where a machine is counting down, and it'll slam on the ground, which can shake the entire level and bounce your character up in the air. It can be really annoying, and unfortunately, Act 2 features a far worse obstacle. There's an Eggman robot that's hovering in the background that's also counting down. down. However, when this one counts all the way down, the robot blows up the entire level. Yeah, so you have to keep hopping on these switches throughout the level to keep resetting the timer, and you do that frequently in Act 2. And this act goes on for a little long too. I am not exaggerating. Press Factory Act 2 is easily the worst and most unfun level in the entire game. I recorded 5 full playthroughs of Superstars for this review, and Act 2 of Press Factory was always the main level I never look forward to replaying. This really sucks. You may have noticed that the time obstacle here is pretty similar to the Ghost from Sandopolis and Smoke from Mania's Oil Ocean, but it's somehow way worse than both of them. Can we stop putting shit like this in classic Sonic games? It's always the worst part of these games, and why was it made progressively worse over time? The Ghosts in Sandopolis were annoying, but they wouldn't instant kill you. The Smoke in Mania was an instant kill, but even that game gave you a bigger time frame, and it wouldn't instantly kill you if you had enough rings or if you were super. Yeah, not even the super forms can survive the explosions in Press Factory Act 2. Fuck this level, holy crap. The boss fights here are fine, but they do kinda introduce an idea for the fights that get a bit worse as the game goes on. Act 1 has you fighting this funny monkey badnik who can cause these pillars to come down to crush you, which can instantly kill you. Yeah, instant kill obstacles in a boss fight. At the very least, it's pretty avoidable here. Also, how many reviews am I gonna do until a funny monkey isn't mentioned? I swear, it just keeps happening. Act 2 also has a crusher obstacle in its boss fight, but this one isn't as bad as long as you figure out the pattern. You basically just avoid getting crushed and jump onto Eggman when there's an opening. I know, it's a very basic summary, it's just kind of an okay boss. The next zone is the Golden Capital, and I'm personally not super into this one. The sort of amusement park theme it starts out with is pretty sweet, but as the level goes on, it just starts to drag. Oh yeah, the zone also has an extra act that's dedicated to Knuckles, and it's an alright act, but I do really love the lighting from the sunset. There's also some sections in the level where you can get crushed if you're not careful, and also when you're Knuckles, you can usually just glide into a wall and start crawling, same with a lot of the other moving platforms, but when it comes to these one platforms that are moving up and down, Knuckles doesn't appear to always stick to them, and I don't understand why. Hopefully they could patch that out or something. Act 1's mini-boss is this funny piggy bank looking robot, which sucks out all your rings, meaning it's the one boss fight you can't cheese through by using a super form. I will admit, while I'm not too crazy about this zone, those loop designs that make a callback to this old concept art from Sonic 1 is an insane reference. So thank you for that, Oshima. So while I think Act 1 and Knuckles Act are kinda just fine, Act 2 is kind of what ruins the zone for me. And it's mainly because it ends with this super lengthy auto-scroller section. Seriously, this goes on for way too long. The controls are fine, but I don't understand why classic Sonic games continue to include these auto-scrollers. I get that Sky Chase was such an iconic Sonic 2 level, but how many people really love that level and would want to replay it over and over again? Is making continuous callbacks to it really necessary? I especially hate when they have such little checkpoints in them. Like if you die without hitting the checkpoint, you're gonna have to replay several minutes worth of auto-scroller. Are you trying to make this not fun on purpose? I guess if there's one kinda cute thing I do like, the little platform you're floating on looks like it has a little face on it. I like it, it looks derpy. But sadly it gets even worse because Act 2's boss fight takes place entirely in the auto-scroller. The boss fight is with Fang, and it just goes on for far too long. And just like I've said before, if you die during the fight, you gotta play the whole thing all over again. I would say this is the worst boss fight in the game, but unfortunately, it's not. I'll get to why later. Oh yeah, during the lengthy boss fight, you may notice that there's a big Fang robot in the background, which you don't get to fight. Yet. Instead, in a cutscene, you see it get destroyed by Trip, who uses the Chaos Emeralds to turn super, also turning her into a dragon? Huh. Zone 9 of 11 is Cyber Station. I love the way the level looks, and I especially like the parts where the game turns you into these little pixely avatar versions of the characters. They look cute. The level does go on for a bit too long, but it is just one act, and it's also pretty late into the game too. So despite the really cool aesthetics, the level does have a few faults. First are the sections where you get turned into a squid, or octopus. These sections are short, but I just wasn't super into them. You can't even get past them using the super forms. But what's easily the worst part of the level is this bit where it turns you into a rat, and you have to travel up this pipe maze section. There are enemies in the pipe maze, and if you get hurt by them, they will make you fall all the way down and you're gonna have to restart from the very bottom. It's really annoying. Replaying it makes it a little better, but that doesn't really excuse it for being pretty obnoxiously designed. mind. The boss here has Eggman fighting Sonic and company while he's joined by a prototype robot of his. It's a pretty solid fight, and even has a fake out ending that leads to an also decent second phase, where the prototype grows and you gotta toss stuff back at him. And one cool Easter egg you can do using this game's shop is that you can actually customize the prototype in the fight itself. So if you select a customized prototype, like the Sonic 2 Robo-Sonic skin, you can end up fighting that in the boss fight. It's pretty freaking cool. Zone number 10 is Frozen Base, a very weirdly placed snow level that's also pretty lackluster. Like, the level looks decent, I love the snow aesthetic, but I'm just not sure how to feel about this being the pre-final level. It has 2 acts, along with a bonus act for Tails, where Act 1 and Tails Act are the ones that are about snow, and they also have these conveyor belts that you can run on and change the direction of. I'm not really a big fan of the conveyor belts, along with this level's kind of excessive use of spikes and other annoying obstacles, and it just drags on way too long. Like, yeah, it's one of the last levels, but this is one of the few zones in the game where it's just not fun for me to replay, and that's just me talking about Act 1. Tails' act has a lot of these same issues, but a little worse, with Tails even needing to dodge these crusher areas. Why is this game suddenly becoming obsessed with instant kill obstacles? So yeah, I guess as an overall snow level, Frozen Base sure as hell ain't no ice cap. The Act 1 boss is actually one of my favorite fights. It's this pterodactyl badnik where you're constantly chasing after it while also trying to jump at it. I did have some issues with the fight when I first played it, and unlike in the level where the conveyor belts were super annoying, in the boss fight it actually made for a decent challenge. It's a lot of fun. So while Act 1 and Tails' act are primarily snow themed, Act 2 might as well have just not been attached to Frozen Base at all. This act is insanely short and has you flying around in one of Eggman's hovermobiles, shooting at enemies, and also these very brief boss fights. It's not a horrible level or anything, but why exactly is it linked to Frozen Base? It has nothing to do with the snow theme whatsoever. Though there is one really cute Easter egg I like about the Eggmobile, and it's that it can change depending on which character you're playing as, where it changes the Eggmobile to represent the original game that the character you're playing as debuted in. That's so freaking cool. Well, this leads to the 11th and final zone in the game, Egg Fortress, which honestly is probably the most generic name for a final Sonic level, and the zone itself is decent. It has some pretty challenging obstacles to get past, and even includes the return of the Sonic CD Batnik, Mecha Boo, if that's how you say it. There's even these little anti-gravity rooms you gotta float through, which I probably would have found super annoying, but I actually think the controls here are really good, and also help to make getting past these sections a little easier. At the end of Act 1, there's no mini-boss, so that means you head right into Act 2, where the game has you traveling through Act 1 again, backwards. This was a pretty interesting concept, especially for the final level, but the execution really left a lot to be desired. It's also a little whack because there are some parts of the level that you're gonna have to wait for platforms to appear, otherwise it's death. It's a pretty messy zone, but overall, I think Egg Fortress was a relatively decent way to close out the game. But I'll say this, it sure as hell ain't no Titanic Monarch. Yes, I love Titanic Monarch, it's still my favorite Mania level. Oh yeah, this is probably where I should mention that this is the one zone where I, and I'm sure many other people, encountered a pretty infamous glitch that's actually from the original classic games. It's the weird hitbox glitch. It's a little hard to explain, but pretty much, your character's hitbox is gonna act as if you're being stuck between these two platforms, and it'll just think you're being crushed. This is a super obnoxious glitch that I'm sure a lot of people are going to complain about with Superstars, but as I've said before, this was present in the classic games. So I guess, if anything, this is both a negative and also kind of a positive because it shows that Superstars gameplay is 100% accurate to how the original games played, but I'm sure other people will agree with me that maybe some elements from those games just shouldn't be brought back. Like, is there any way we could even patch this annoying ass glitch that's been irritating for Sonic fans since literally day one? Like, is that possible? Oh yeah, there's also this weird ass background element in Egg Fortress. You can see it in the one area with the window showing off space, and you can see the end from Sonic Frontiers in the background. It doesn't do anything at all, and it doesn't tie into the story in any way. So I guess this might have been just a weird inclusion that Azuka wanted to throw in just for the hell of it, without actually thinking about how it just makes no sense. Like, continuity wise, it shouldn't even be there. So why is the end even here? So I guess before I talk about the game's final boss and other content, is there something I might have skimmed over while looking at these levels? Like, was there a major element from them that I just didn't mention yet? Oh, the soundtrack! So what do I think about this game's music? Well, okay, being honest, it's a mixed bag. Focusing on the good, I like most of the level themes. They're pretty catchy and really fit their environments most of the time, but I will say, in comparison to, say, Mania's soundtrack, it falls flat in a lot of areas. Not that some of the songs on the better half of the soundtrack are terrible, they're still really good and I like them, but you can definitely tell that even some of the better tracks in the game feel a little inconsistent. It's a very too many cooks sort of situation. T-Lopes is back and knocks it out the park, and some of the other composers do a very solid job. Really wish we had a credits list for all the songs, but the game's music just overall has a very confused direction. What especially doesn't help is the other half of the game's soundtrack. You know, the bad half. Jun Senoue, the man behind the adventure soundtracks, along with Heroes, 3D Blast, Shadow the Hedgehog, and even Generations, was put into the position of being the sound director for Superstars. And sadly, when you hear a song in the game that Jun handled, you can really tell. For some weird ass reason, despite huge fan backlash about it, Jun continued making music using the same shitty sound fonts from both Sonic 4 and Origins. It once again sounds like crap and really sticks out in a soundtrack that already feels pretty uneven. It really clashes with the musical styles the worst. So yes, this soundtrack is essentially half decent follow-up to Sonic Mania but not as good, and half Sonic 4 Episode 3. What sucks is that a lot of these compositions really would have sounded just fine if Jun just used real instruments. Fang's theme has a really cute reference to his theme from the Game Gear games, but I wasn't able to notice because I was a little too distracted by the music sounding like this. It didn't work for Sonic 4, it didn't fit in Origins, and it sure as hell doesn't work in Superstars. I don't want to harp on this for too long since literally everyone and their grandmother have been memeing about this game's soundtrack since launch, but holy crap. Jun, I don't know if you're watching or even going to listen to me, but you need to stop using this sound font. The good half of the soundtrack is decent, but for the other half, Jun seriously dropped the ball here. It's also kind of funny how the mini soundtrack only seemed to feature songs that Jun didn't make on his own. It's almost like Sega knew his songs sounded like ass. Also, why didn't we get a full soundtrack release around the game's launch? What was that about? Okay, so while it appears Jun handled most of the boss themes, thankfully, it doesn't appear that he did the music for the final boss. Talking about that now, this boss sucks. Like, it's a fucking terrible boss fight. It lasts 2 phases and takes a long time to beat. The first phase has you running and dodging obstacles sent by Eggman's massive mech, and you do that until you get the opportunity to smack blue missiles back at him, the same ones from the Speed Jungle boss fight actually. So phase 1 isn't too bad. Phase 2 is a pain in the ass. This time, instead of the Eggman robot shooting projectiles in the background, it's now chasing after you and you're gonna have to keep dodging more obstacles, including new attacks like lasers, zero gravity, and some of the more difficult attacks to dodge. The mech is going to use its hands to either smash the floor or spin to kill you, and if you're not careful, the attacks can be instant kill. The main issue with this boss fight is that it lasts way too long. It takes several hits to beat, and if you die, you gotta start all the way from phase 1. I think the fight's difficulty is decent for a final boss, but I remember getting stuck on this fight for several hours when I first played this game. I hated it so much, and I almost gave up on beating it. That was until one of my friends gave me some pretty helpful advice for phase 2, which is using the avatar power to get 3 quick hits when the phase starts. This made the boss a little shorter to get through, but upon replaying it, it still took me like 50 minutes to beat. Yeah, this final boss has a lot of issues, and it's a pretty bad way to end the game's main story. Yeah, another issue. This is not the true final boss, not even if you get all the Chaos Emeralds. You see, after completing the main story, you unlock another story to play through, Trip's story. Not only that, but you'll get to unlock Trip as a playable character in the main story too. Yeah, you can play as Trip, and it's pretty awesome. She can spin dash and use all the Chaos Emerald powers like before, along with having her own ability. She can transform into a little spike ring, and can roll on walls and ceilings. Oh, and her extra ability is basically the Fire Flower from Mario since it has her shooting fireballs. All in all, Trip is a lot of fun to play as, and she's a cool extra character to unlock. Trip's story, on the other hand, The best comparison I can make for this is, remember how Knuckles' story in Sonic 3 was made slightly more difficult to play through? Well, that's pretty much what they did for Trip's story, but it's somehow way worse. There are two positives for Trip's story. One, her gameplay is solid, and two, she doesn't need to recollect the Chaos Emeralds. They get carried over from the main story, so she has both her Emerald powers and her super form available from the start. So it's a little like you're playing through a New Game Plus mode. Trip's super form is also a little different in comparison to the other characters. She's still invincible and can only stay super as long as you have rings, but like the cutscene from earlier showed off, she transforms into a dragon that can actually fly around in the air. It's a pretty broken ability and could probably be a lot of fun, but I personally just wasn't really crazy about Trip's super form. It's fine, and I do applaud them for making it different compared to everyone else, but I kinda wish we just had a regular super Trip. Anyways, Trip's story has you playing through all the levels in the game, along with Trip being able to access all the character exclusive acts too. Basically, you see how things in the story took place in Trip's perspective. So from a story's point of view, it's pretty neat. But from a gameplay perspective, well, the level designs were changed to be more challenging, and at a lot of points you can find yourself getting hurt or even killed by completely bullshit sections. I have never been more thankful that this game didn't have a lives function because holy crap. I didn't struggle horribly or anything, but Trip's story can really be a drag to play through. I can only imagine how irritated fans are gonna get with Trip's story, especially if they're the fans who didn't really vibe with the main story to begin with. But it gets worse. For some incredibly stupid reason, all the hits in every boss fight were doubled. So if you really didn't enjoy a boss fight in the main story, then Trip's story is gonna make sure you absolutely hate it. Oh my god, Trip's Golden Capital boss fight is way worse. Cause I'm sure that's an element that people will feel was missing from the auto-scroller section, making it longer. I don't understand why they did that to the boss fights. The levels are already a pain in the ass because they were changing so much. So why did they make the boss fights longer too? That is legitimately not fun. Don't get me wrong, I love Superstars, but some of the late game and Trip's story is just... I gotta be in the right mood to want to play these parts of the game again, which doesn't happen too often. It's not that I think making the levels and boss fights harder is a bad thing. I try to view it like more the main story is for casual gamers, and Trip's story is for people who maybe mastered the main story levels enough and want a more difficult challenge. A little similar to the Lost Levels, but I wouldn't personally go that far when it comes to describing Trip's level design. Again, it's less like the Lost Levels and more Knuckles in Sonic 3. Hell, just like in Sonic 3, Trip is fighting the Egg Robo instead of Eggman. Another cute Easter egg I really like is how Trip's Eggmobile in Frozen Base Act 2 is modeled after the Flamemobile boss in Sonic 3. I love that so much. However, in spite of all these annoying and more difficult changes in Trip's story, what is easily the worst part of this story mode is Trip's final boss. Remember all the annoying design choices and obnoxious instant kill attacks from the main story final boss? Well, Trip's final boss? It's somehow worse. On Trip's end, she's fighting Fang, not Eggman. It still has two phases, but somehow both phases have severe problems. Phase 1 has Fang driving his hover bike, shooting missiles, and doing a move where he causes copies of himself to appear. However, the worst obstacle to look out for in this phase are the red lasers, because for whatever reason, they're instant kill. So yeah, if you don't dodge them well enough, you die. They can even appear right in front of you during Fang's copy attack. But while Phase 1 sucks, Phase 2 is worse. This one features Fang using the robot version of himself, which you might remember seeing in Golden Capital Zone earlier. And if you're, you know, a normal person, then you're most likely gonna die almost immediately once Phase 2 starts. For some dumbass reason, Phase 2 has multiple instant kill attacks, which includes the Fang Robo shooting out the spiderweb stuff that can catch Trip, which could hold her in place to get shot and instantly killed by Fang's gun attack. That's not fair. Why are these instant kill? This entire boss fight lasts nearly 10 minutes, even if you skip the cutscenes. And what makes it even worse is that if you're playing this game blind, you'll have both zero indication and zero reaction time on what his new attacks are gonna be. So if you spend a long ass time trying to beat this boss, you'll end up getting blindsided by a new attack you haven't seen before, and guess what? You're back to Phase 1. I'm gonna say this right now, as one of the very few people who will say that they I love this game a lot. This boss fight with Fang is not only the worst boss fight in the game, but it is, without a doubt, the worst part of the entire game. It's not fun, it lasts way too long, and the multiple instant kill attacks seriously ruin the entire fight. And you know what makes it a little worse? Despite the assload amount of time it'll likely take for you to beat this boss, this isn't even the true final boss either. When you eventually finish Trip's story, you unlock the last story. Yeah, despite Trip's story being a whole lot worse in almost every aspect, you basically have to play through it if you want to complete the game. Also, playing through more than one story just to reach the last story? Never would have thought I'd see this design choice rear its ugly head again. With that said, I found it kinda weird how some fans were getting genuinely angry about this design choice. Like, I don't like this idea either, but it's not a new concept exclusive to Superstars. So tell me, which would you rather do? Play Superstars twice, Heroes 4 times, Shadow 10 times, or hell, the 6 stories in Adventure, the 2 stories in Adventure 2, the 3 stories in 06? Seriously, pick your poison. So whatever, what is the last story in Superstars like? Well, it's mainly just for the true final boss, the Black Dragon. Where the what? What the hell is this? A fucking dragon? I guess it's tied to the lore of the North Star Islands, and I also guess it's not like dragons being in this game is completely out of nowhere considering Trip's super form, but still, an actual dragon? It's not like a robot made by Eggman? Interesting choice for a final boss. And at least his design looks rad. So how's the boss fight itself? Is it as obnoxiously designed as the 2 final bosses from the story modes? Well, no. Actually, I think it's a pretty decent boss fight. Basically, you're supersonic flying around and trying to attack the dragon. You can do this by either ramming into him, or knocking these blue meteorites back at him. Of course, since you're supersonic, you have to worry about collecting rings so you don't run out. Thankfully, there is a decent amount of them floating around. Not only that, but sometimes Tails and Knuckles can fly by to drop even more rings, which is super helpful. The boss fight lasts 2 phases, just like the other final bosses, and there's only 2 real obstacles to look out for. First are the black hole attacks, which can kill you if you're not careful. Yeah, I guess it's another instant kill attack, but this one you can actually avoid by using Supersonic's air dash. Yeah, the same one like in Sonic Mania's true final boss, but also like Mania, it comes with a price, being rings. Yeah, I guess another obstacle of sorts is that the dash costs like 5 rings, so I usually just don't try to use the dash, only really relying on it whenever I get sucked into a black hole. But the black hole attack is only in the first phase. The second phase has the dragon change its form, which almost represents a Dark Gaia enemy, which makes me wonder if that was intentional. And he's gonna use different attacks which are challenging but also not too hard. In fact, I'd probably say phase 2 is slightly easier than phase 1. So while this boss fight does have some annoying design choices, it could also probably be way worse if you go into it immediately after defeating the Fang robot. Overall, I kinda like this boss fight. I think it's a solid way to end the game. I also really like the music. It's not like one of the best final boss themes in the series, but it still sounds pretty good, and it kinda reminded me a bit of Snowboard Kids 2. I know, a very random game to think of. Again, it's just really solid boss music, and since it doesn't sound too bad, that most likely means June didn't work on it. So that's a plus. But if there is one thing I really don't like about this boss fight, I really hated how the last attack has you needing to press the button at the perfect time. I died a few times because of this, and it's also literally how the game ends, so it's not really an amazing note to go out on, but it's still a solid final boss. And I think a lot of fans would probably take this boss fight over the Egg Robo or Fang Robot fights. Looking at the non-single player content, the multiplayer was probably one of the more disappointing aspects of the game, specifically for how the co-op in the main story is only tied to local play. There's no online capabilities at all, besides battle mode. I haven't gotten to play the co-op for myself, but it looks like a lot of chaotic fun, kinda similar to the new Super Mario Bros. Games. Apparently, the reason why online co-op wasn't implemented was because RSS didn't want the online lag to get in the way of people playing. While I understand that, I feel like they should have just put the mode in and maybe just patch it to be better in the future. Come on, they really could have one up the new Super Mario Bros. Games in this aspect by having online co-op first. Whatever happened to Sega does what Nintendo don't. But looking at the battle mode, which does have online functions, it's fine. This mode has you play 3 rounds of different minigames like collecting stars, being the last to survive, or racing. Again, it's a decent online mode, just not anything too special. Hell, while I was recording footage of it on my Series X, it didn't really seem to be popular with players. I came across like one kid playing as Metal Sonic, but that was kind of it. The rest of the time I was just playing with bots. It's not an awful mode to play, it's just really annoying that this is the only multiplayer mode to have online capabilities. Though if you do win all 3 rounds and get first place, you can win up to 10 medals, which can be super useful for later. And one of the levels you can play on is Green Hill. Strange that it took Sega this long to realize Green Hill is better as an extra level and not forced onto the player like in the last few games. It's even in Lego form, which is pretty cool. The character you play as in battle mode is the prototype robot, but you can customize it by buying stuff from the shop. The shop is where you use your medals collected throughout the game to buy robot parts and other things to customize your character in battle mode. It's pretty decent, and one of the characters you can make is even Metal Sonic, which I managed to do while recording footage. Also, just wondering, why do we need to purchase multiple paint cans just to paint different parts of the robot? And how come buying another prototype to customize costs 50 medals? Doesn't that seem like a bit much? Anyways, another robot you can make is Metal Knuckles, and his first real appearance in the game since I think Sonic R. There's also a Metal Amy and a Metal Tails. And since I bought the digital deluxe edition, I was able to get the Robo Sonic skin from Sonic 2. But seeing how Robo Sonic controls here kinda makes me wish he was also a selectable skin for Sonic in the main story too. I guess while we're on that controversial topic, what was going on with the DLC character skins? I love all of them, but why were they handled so stupid? Like the deluxe edition is $70 to get all the DLC, but not even that version has all the DLC. Not only that, but if you spend $60 on the base game, then you're gonna need to spend about $15 more just to get all the DLC. What the hell? But taking a look at the actual DLC, there's the Lego skins, which are all pretty cute. Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, Amy, and even Eggman get Lego skins, and I like how they all move like actual minifigures. Though I do find it kinda weird how Eggman's Lego model is his modern design. Then again, Lego Amy also uses her modern design, so I guess it's not too out of place. My personal favorite digital deluxe edition DLC skin might actually be the rabbit. Not because rabbits are my favorite animal or anything, they are, but mainly because this rabbit skin is actually one of Sonic's original design concepts, which Naoto Oshima came up with when he was creating the character. And apparently the rabbit's name is Max? Or Max S? Genuinely, seeing Max appear in an official Sonic game fighting Eggman is pretty amazing. You see, these are the type of character skins I want to see more of in these games. It's so damn cool. However, my favorite character skin isn't actually part of the Deluxe Edition DLC. It's the one that's locked behind that stupid newsletter. Classic Amy in her modern outfit is so damn cute, and it's a really fun idea. Now all we gotta see is modern Amy in her Rosie the Rascal dress, and it'll come full circle. Though if there is one minor nitpick with this, it's that if you play Cyberstation with the modern outfit, it doesn't have a unique pixely character form since it just uses Amy's regular design instead. Kinda disappointing, but it's not a huge deal. If I had to rank the character skins in general, I'd probably put the Lego skins in 4th, Max the Rabbit in 3rd, and Classic Amy in her modern outfit in 1st. When it comes to my second favorite character skins, they're not actually able to be accessed by normal means, at least not in the US. Yep, I'm referring to the infamous comic book skins DLC, which garnered a lot of controversy from the fanbase, and for a very damn good reason. I would have greatly preferred all the DLC be part of the deluxe edition, and I think just about everyone would have preferred that too, because for some stupid ass reason, Sega decided to make these amazing looking character skins locked behind the Japan exclusive pre-order edition. So fans who aren't in Japan and don't want to import the game are gonna end up missing out. Why? They look so damn good. They're even better looking than the actual character models. The cell shading on them is so pretty. This isn't fair. However, there is one way for people outside of Japan to get these character skins, and that's through a very crappy rewards program presented by Kroger's. Fucking Kroger's? Yeah, all you have to do is just earn enough points on their Points Reward Plus program, and then redeem your points so you can get the skins on either Switch, PlayStation, or Xbox. How great. Thank you for nothing, Sega and Kroger's. Though you may have noticed that Kroger's is only giving out codes for the console versions, but not the PC versions? What the hell's that about? Guess while I'm on that topic, a few fans may have remembered that when the game initially launched, the comic book skins were actually made available on Steam for free. Clearly, this was done by by complete accident, because you were only able to grab this DLC on Steam for about 20 minutes, since Sega quickly took it down. Why? Why are they purposely holding back this DLC from fans? What, are we supposed to wait a full year later for Sonic Superstars Plus, where all the DLC is going to be available for free with no additional cost? And is Superstars Plus is where we're going to finally get online co-op? How happy are people going to actually be when that happens? If this actually happens, I'll be so pissed. And then buy it anyways. Though I guess if they are going to take the opportunity to give us a Plus version of Superstars, along with all the DLC and the online co-op, could they also fix the music that June made to not sound like shit? I feel like that would probably be the only thing that could really justify paying full price for this game again. Oh, Superstars Plus, you better not exist. Fuck it, give us Mighty and Ray too. What happened to them? And I guess that's basically everything with Sonic Superstars. And look at that, the video's about an hour long again. What the hell's wrong with me? Okay, what do I actually think about this game? Well, there's a lot of aspects about it that I really like. I love the art direction, I love most of the levels and the good half of the soundtrack, but a lot of it is being held back by some weird gimmicks with lackluster execution, the soundtrack of Sonic 4 Episode 3 making a guest appearance, a lot of the boss fights suck, Trip's story isn't really that fun, no online co-op, the best character skins aren't available in America. Okay, look, this game isn't bad, it's just weird. It's very weird. There are strokes of brilliance every so often, but then there's also moments where you're just like, what the fuck was that about? Though controversially, I think Sonic Superstars is better than Sonic Mania. At least in terms of being fully original. No rehashed levels in the main story is great to see, and my first impression of this game was incredibly positive, to a point where I felt like, wow, this is the classic Sonic game made just for me. So with that mindset, I attempted to look at the lesser parts of the game as, oh, fans are gonna hate this, but I really like it, and that remained the case for a pretty short while. As the game went on, a lot of the weaker aspects of the game really started to stick out, to a point where I really couldn't ignore them anymore. I still really enjoy this game, but it's not perfect. But there's another classic Sonic game where I feel almost similar feelings towards. And that's when I realized something pretty huge about this game, which I think made everything add up more. This is not a proper follow-up to Sonic Mania, or even a true sequel to Sonic 3 and Knuckles. It's not Sonic the Hedgehog 5. It's Sonic CD 2. Or would that be Sonic DVD? Sonic Blu-ray? Let me explain that a little further. Sonic CD is one of my absolute favorite Sonic games and video games in general, but in comparison to a lot of the other classic Sonic games, it's weird. It's really fucking weird. The level design is wacky as hell, it's got that very out there time travel gimmick, and there's a lot of aspects about that game that really could have been executed better. Sound familiar? Sonic Superstars is a spiritual sequel to Sonic CD. Hell, Naoto Oshima was the main one in charge of both these games too. This really adds up more than you guys might realize. But do I think Superstars is better than CD? Well, it's longer than CD, especially since you play through the game 2 times, and I do think the level design is slightly better in some aspects. There's an awful lot of elements in Superstars that I think it does better than what CD did, but Sonic CD is still superior due to my own personal connection with it, along with it being a decent length and having way shorter boss fights. CD also still has a better soundtrack, 2 of them even, and I don't think anyone's really gonna argue that. I guess that's kinda where I am with this game after sitting with it for a whole month. Sonic Superstars was a mostly fun but overpriced ride. I'll have to let time decide where I think this ranks amongst my favorite classic Sonic games, but for the most part, I greatly enjoyed Superstars. I would also genuinely like to see Oshima work on another game in the future. Hell, wouldn't it be kinda neat if Evening Star and Arzes could potentially collab and make one hell of a follow-up to Superstars? That might be me just asking for a miracle in that aspect, but I really kinda hope that happens. And you know what? Fuck it. Here's my tier list on where I rank the 2D Sonic games I've played so far. I haven't played the Rush games or the 3DS games yet, so I didn't put them on the list. But feel free to bitch at me in the comments about how I rank these games, and also for putting Advanced 2 at the very bottom. Where it fucking belongs! If I had anything else to say about Superstars, maybe just wait for a decent price drop or something before picking it up. As much as I do love it, 60 to 70 is a bit too much for this game. Maybe wait until it's like $40 or something lower. The game's gorgeous, I love Trip, half the soundtrack is decent, and I wish the lesser parts of the game were better. Not a whole lot else to say. Sonic Superstars is an imperfect game that I love on a very complicated level. I think I'll wrap up the review here for now before I keep repeating myself. myself. So thank you all for sitting through this very lengthy review of Sonic Superstars. I don't know how to end this video, but I hope you all appreciated me deep diving into yet another brand new Sonic game. I'll see you all in the next review, and thanks for watching. I hate Sonic the Hedgehog. Goodbye.